So the UFC have just inked a brand new broadcasting deal with Paramount, and I believe CBS is involved in this somewhat as well. And a lot of people are unhappy about this, so I wanted to jump on my second channel, Artem at Home, and talk about this. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. This is my second channel. I'm going to get a bit more active now that I've got some channel art made up. I'm just kind of waiting for it to come through, and then I've got to pay for it, but that's a whole nother situation. So what has happened is the UFC has left ESPN. They kind of seemed like that was something that was going to happen for a long time. It kind of seemed like ESPN and UFC were kind of like had some friction because maybe the pay-per-view sales were a bit lower. And because of that, they've signed a new massive deal with Paramount and CBS. And it involves no pay-per-views anymore. So pretty much what is going to happen is the UFC is now a part of a streaming service. So you pay a monthly fee to be a part of Paramount Plus or whatever it is that it's going to be broadcast on. And you've got the UFC, you've got the UFC's numbered events, their pay-per-view events, and you've got your fight nights and all of that. And a lot of people are kind of looking at this in a negative light, and I just don't understand why. At the end of the day, now you only pay a monthly subscription fee for every month, and you get all of the UFC cards. It's not like the UFC have decreased the amount of cards, like they have slightly. There's going to be 43 cards a year, and there's still going to be 13 pay-per-view events a year as well. So these pay-per-view events are going to be pay-per-view events you don't pay for. Maybe they're going to be broadcast on CBS. I will be honest, I don't have any familiarity with these two companies whatsoever. I don't think Paramount is in New Zealand, and I don't think CBS is in New Zealand either. But ESPN was, so I think that what's going to happen for me is they're just going to move everything to UFC Fight Pass, which is epic, honestly. But as for this subscription service, though, to be honest, like, you pay the monthly fee. Like, you've just saved money. Like, people that were paying for the pay-per-views, as Jacob from We Want Picks has mentioned, like, you just save $6,000 over 7 years in actually paying for the pay-per-view if you actually do. And it's kind of like an overall good thing. I think the big kind of response for people is that the cards are going to be lower quality. And here's the thing about the lower quality cards that I think you guys that these people that are making these complaints don't really understand. The UFC roster is the same. So the way that the UFC's current sort of structure for cards works is they've got their really like big name fighters, and then they've got like their not so name fighters, and they would stack these big name fighters on the pay-per-view cards, right? To make them, like, look at this weekend's card, UFC 319, Duplessis versus Chimaev, stacked. So they'll put them all here on their pay-per-view cards, and then, like, they'll run out of them. So then all of the Apex slop is filled with the bottom barrels. In theory, they could actually mingle this a little bit, so they've got their big name fighters on just their normal fight night cards, as well as, like, their Apex slop fighters as well, and they can kind of just mix them up a little bit more. Like, it's not like we're just gonna get more low quality events, because the UFC roster, no disrespect to the fighters, I understand how bad this sounds, like the way that I'm wording it, but the UFC roster, it's the same. The UFC has the same fighters to use to distribute throughout these events. So the card quality, it can't decrease because the roster's the same. The only way that the card quality can decrease is if the roster quality decreases, honestly. And it's quite interesting to see, because I think that they're going to increase the kind of skill of the roster overall, because this contender series coming up, guys, it's a good one. Trust me, I really do believe in a lot of fighters on this one. And typically that means they're going to start making a lot of cuts. And as unfortunate it is for those fighters that were in the UFC, cutting those fighters has to kind of make sense to make space for the contender series guys coming in. Another thing that I want to mention as well, fighter pay. This is kind of something I wanted to talk about at the end. Right now, the UFC's deal is $214 million. I don't know how long it went, but in theory, over 7 years, this is $7.7 billion. That was $1.5 billion over 7 years, if you wanted to expand it to 7 years. So the UFC is now getting paid so much more money from their broadcaster, plus income coming from UFC Fight Pass, plus income from event sales and ticket sales. The UFC makes a lot of money, a crazy amount of money. And I think JT Lyons, of course, once again from We Want Picks, said, or maybe it was Charles Johnson actually said this. What has happened is, I think they only get 3% of the income that comes in, the revenue that comes in, sorry. I think that I kind of messed up what I was saying, but the point is NBA players get 50% of the revenue. That's why they get paid so much. The UFC fighters, I believe, at the moment, only get paid 3% of the revenue of the UFC. 3%. And they're the guys that keep it going. I think Charles Johnson has been kind of given his opinions. Maybe it was on a different tweet about this. So in theory, we need to get more money into the UFC. We need to increase the pay of the fighters because of this new deal. Like, if I see this new deal come through and all of a sudden the minimum pay is still 15k for 15k, I will continue to say that fighter pay is too low. Now, I do understand that, like, no, it just doesn't really make sense. Like, 15k is fucking bullshit. I'm sorry. You can't justify it. Because, think about it like this, right? I'm going to bring up a very niche example. Very niche example. Edward Vartanyan was in discussions to fight for the UFC. And he fights for a promotion that a lot of people potentially watching this video may have never even heard of, an ACA. Do you guys know how... Oh, he's not fighting for ACA anymore. But do you guys know how much money he was getting paid? I just got fucking peptide advertisement. But do you guys know how much ACA is paying Edward Vartanyan and how much he was offered? $12,000 was what the UFC offered Edwin Vartanyan to show. He gets paid 75k to show, 75k to win. They were trying to get him on a Contender Series deal. This is a guy that's 23-4, a guy that's already getting paid lots of money. And like, another thing as well that's coming out too is the current KSW champion, double champion, Saladin Panasi, apparently won't sign with the UFC because they're not offering him an amount of money. Apparently Saladin Panasi gets paid $600,000 to fight. If the UFC offered him 150k to fight, what do you think he does? He tells them to fuck off. He just does. So it's like, the UFC needs to start paying their fighters more with this massive deal. However, this is true as well. Why are people upset about this deal? I don't really know. Like, you're saving money in the pay-per-view. I feel like I just kind of went on a rant. But yeah, there's no more pay-per-views. It's going to be in general good. Maybe Paramount Plus isn't a good streaming service. I wouldn't know. I have no idea if it is even on New Zealand. Maybe it is. Maybe I need to sign up to Paramount Plus. But you know what, guys? You know what, guys? I will do that. I will do that. There we go. It's Charles Johnson, 3% of the revenue combined. I'll let you guys know. That's it. That's the video. That's a mess. I'll see you guys in the next one.